welcome to the Board Game Cave, where this week we are revealing more of the top 100 games of all time, as ranked by BoardGameGeek.com. And this week our game of choice is Eclipse, which is currently resting at number 12 on the list. Could be changed by the time this comes to air. But we're going to review it in the same four categories we always do of replayability, gameplay, theme, and components. And we'll start out by introducing ourselves.
Hey everybody, welcome back. That's Mike here with you again.
I'm Chris.
Jared.
And let's get right to it, and we'll start with components. Why don't you start?
Components. There is a lot of components to this game. We played on a fairly large table, and before we even started the game, we realized that it was not going to be big enough for us to have our individual components and the map of the galaxy or whatever. So we actually played on two separate tables. We each had our own little table, our own little TV tray, for our individual governments or society and stuff like that. And then we had the big table, which was the galaxy, and that worked out pretty well. But there is a ton of components in this game, and they're pretty, and they do their function, their purpose, whatever. Sometimes it was a little confusing at the beginning because your main card that you keep up with on your society and all the different elements, it's tight on there, and there's a lot of little bitty pieces on it. And let me tell you, whenever somebody jars your table, you're going to be upset because you've got 30 little widgets on that card, and they all shake just a little bit.
Just
but
like
that's
shaking the camera right now.
Yeah. But it's enough to mess up your card. So yeah, the components are good, but there's a ton of them. And usually I like a lot of components, especially quality ones. Sometimes I think it can be overdone a little bit though. And the more I think about it, I think maybe they went a little bit overkill on the components for Eclipse.
Possible?
Yeah, I wouldn't think so either. So I'm going to rate that as I'm going to give it a 7 because I like the components, but ton of them. I think they could have made it a little bit more simplified.
See, I liked that there was a lot of components. And now, any game, I think these what they call 4E games, where they're explore, exterminate, whatever the 4E stand for. They're big games though, like Twilight Imperium, where they try to make this huge game that spans many eons or lots of space. These games you have to have a lot of pieces for because there's you're representing a whole society, and not only the society but your technology and your armies and whatever else. So it does get a little bit overwhelming if you've never played it before, especially because the technology tiles and the ship component tiles tend to look a lot alike to the person who's never played before. And when I got the game, I got it from someone else that already punched all the components, so they were just thrown in the box. And so it took me a long time to separate out all these, especially since I'd never played before.
And if you don't know about now, this man right here, anal about the components, pushing them out. You can't push out his components. No. He's gonna break that cherry on that card. You got to punch out and he keeps the framework for him for no reason at all.
Show some support here. Show them I'm not the only one. That's completely normal. But anyway, I think that the components mostly are just wood and cardboard. The ships are plastic, which are good, and they have different types of ships represented. But I'm going to take away a little bit because I think they're a little bit too close to each other, especially with the cardboard components.
Yeah. And
there's no rhyme or reason, at least in my mind, why there's different amounts of each one. You'd think it'd be the ones that you would want to play more of or something, but it didn't go that way in our group. So I think they could have been differentiated them a little bit better, and so for that reason, I'm going to knock it down to an 8.
All the way to an 8.
That's low for me.
Brutal. Brutal. Yeah, so components on this game, there are a bunch of them. There's a ton of them. There's a galaxy's worth of tokens,
You
chips,
tell about the size of the box.
all
Yeah,
that kind of
it's
stuff. Yeah,
huge.
it's big, and it needs to be. So, but I think you run into a couple of issues there. You know, it's the quantity versus quality thing. A lot of times it's almost impossible to have both quantity and quality at the same time. This game definitely gives you quantity, but I didn't feel like the quality was tremendous. It's not bad either. It's pretty average, and it gets, you have everything that you need, but nothing in there is particularly eye-catching or really innovative or different. And as they've touched on already, a lot of the components, because there are so many of them, you'd think that they would differentiate them a little bit more. All of them really look pretty much the same. You have to really look closely at them to see which one of the technology trees that they plug into. You would think that they could make them different shapes or colors or something like that, a little bit different than just having a little symbol on there. But anyway, so there's tons of components, so the players that like a lot of stuff, you're going to be really happy. Are they real high quality? No, not really, but they couldn't be too much more than they are because they're very small to begin with, and it still ate up the entire table and then some. So if they tried to make them more intricate, they would have just been even bigger, which would have just turned into this sprawling colossus of a game.
So the components were above average, but they gave you a lot of them.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
So,
Yeah, so it's not a bad
low
thing in
scoring.
the end.
Yeah.
You know, not a bad thing in the end. But just because of the fact that they were kind of dull, and that's nitpicky, but that's what we do here, I'm going to give them a 7. Had everything you needed, but just kind of there they were.
Yeah.
I gave it the extra 1 for a number of components alone, because that is my thing.
There you go.
All right, so let's move on to theme.
Theme. It's another alien society against alien society, building it up, civilization kind of resource building management. I like those kind of games, you know, especially whenever they're well done and not chinced or whatever. And I found this game really well done. I mean, there's a lot of different ways you can go with this particular genre and everything. They made it really intricate in certain areas and everything. So it's nothing we haven't seen before. But if you like this kind of game, like this kind of genre, it's a good, good example of it, I guess. So I'm going to go 7 on it.
The theme is, galactic conquest, and it's really, the technology trees are all combat based. I mean, all the technologies in the game that you can research are so you can buy combat equipment.
Yeah.
There's no technology like refrigeration and stuff on Civilization where you could get reading and writing and arithmetic or whatever. It's all focused on combat, but yet combat hardly ever happens.
Yeah.
In the long scheme of things. We mostly just attacked each other at the end of the game, but along the way, except for the barbarians, you have very little combat. Mostly it's like raising up Cold War type stuff. You're gaining a lot of technology just to keep the other guy from mowing you over.
Yeah.
And so the theme, to me, it was not trying to be combat based. It's trying to be about galactic exploring and stuff, but it's tend to focus heavily on the combat, which doesn't happen a lot. So I think that was a misstep. They should have thrown in more technology trees that were more about diplomacy or building society or something, rather than just more missiles.
Yeah.
The theme, though, that we didn't play, you can also, in the advanced game, you can play an alien race that each of them has a special ability. But that was neat, but it didn't change the game a whole lot. So, theme, I'm gonna give it a 7.5 because it's not really my thing anyway. But I think with what they had, they could have done a lot more with it, but they tend to focus too heavily on the combat, which is not a huge part of the game. So if it would have been like all about killing each other, it might have been okay, but it's not. It's about...
So you, in your civilization building game in space, you want to see the civilization actually get built up a little bit more than just
I
their military.
See them become more advanced as they go, rather than just military.
But surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, our friend Keith that also played with us, he came really close to winning, or he was one of the top scorers. He built one ship the whole game, right? Or maybe two. I mean, he went the whole game as not a pacifist, but he was working on other elements, and he didn't really even build a ship until the very end. And then it was just trying to hold off.
He built monoliths, which is a victory point.
Yeah. So you don't have to go all military.
But if any of us had ever played before, I think that we would have spotted that earlier and crushed him, because he was wide open. And we did at the end of the game stop him from winning because of that. He had no ships to defend.
So that wrapped you up at a what now?
At
7.5.
7.5.
7.5? Okay. Yeah, so the theme on this is galactic exploration and civilization building and things like that. And for me, it was just sort of here. It was okay. It didn't get me really that excited. The artwork is fine, but it's nothing spectacular. But it's a good theme for what you're trying to do. The theme does fit the gameplay. It just is a theme that doesn't excite me all that much. But to rate it just for what it is, I guess we'll stick it in there at a nice cozy 7. And we'll just leave it at that. It's a fine theme, but it's nothing that really excites me that much.
Well, it's just not going to make number 12 of all time at this current rate.
Well, yeah, probably not. Probably not. Although the where this game really picks up is about to come around for me.
So gameplay, let's go ahead and talk about that.
There's a steep learning curve. There's a ton to take in, even for people that have played these kind of games before. Some of it, and I'm sure it was explained better in the rules, maybe we just didn't pick it up. Seemed like there were certain gray areas in the game where we had to make house rules or choices. Like, we don't know exactly what we should do in this situation, so we made a decision on it. Because simply there's a ton of rules in this. I mean, the gameplay, they say for every player, the game is going to last about an hour. That's a lot of gameplay in that time span and everything. And there's a ton you can do and a ton of different ways you can do it, but none of it really just jumped out at me as being, well, this is totally new, or I've never seen this before. I've seen it all, maybe not all in one game, maybe from several different games. Nothing stood out, but there's a ton of rules and a ton of gameplay, I mean, a bunch. And I don't know if I like that or not. I think they could have maybe gone a different route. I don't like my games so intricate and in-depth and stuff like that. It almost sucks some of the enjoyment out of it for me. I've never been a fan of playing a game for like 5 hours like we did the other night.
Yeah,
or
it's
6.
definitely an acquired taste.
It is. It's a long play. So, to tell you the truth, on the gameplay itself, I'm going to go 6. Seemed like it was a little overdrawn and long for me. And some of it was, I think, more detailed and more confusing than it really needed to be, actually. So I'm going to go 6 on gameplay.
That's where I'm going to disagree, because I think the gameplay is what makes this game a 12. It may not be a 12 in my book, but it's why people rate it so high, I think, is because to take that many moving parts and make a game that works with that many people all at once is a beauty. And, I mean, there's like 6 different actions you can take each round, and the beauty of it is you can take as many actions as you want. It just, you're going to pay for it next round.
Yeah.
So I think the gameplay it's very interesting. I've never seen the whole thing with you can only go through wormholes and you have to position the tiles so that you can go through it one way and you can't let your buddy in the other way.
map was a nice touch. They did the galaxy map very cool.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. And I'm gonna give it a 9 on gameplay because I don't like playing 6-hour games often, but when I do, I really like this kind of game where they can weave it to where once you're playing, you don't have to. We didn't really consult the rule book all that much, and none of us had ever played before that were playing for the first time. And so when you can get past that first 30 minutes where you're explaining the rules to everybody, and then for the next 4 to 5 hours, everybody's just taking their turn, that's pretty good, especially for a game that long.
I think we're going to just agree to disagree on that at the end. So.
Maybe, Twilight Imperium, which I've played, to me, I know Twilight Imperium has a lot more diplomacy in it than this game really does, but I might enjoy that better. But when I was playing it, it was the wrong time, so I have to give that another shot. But this is I've heard it's called Twilight Imperium Light, and it really is. It's a...
I did all that tell you something. If a game still takes 4 or 5, 6 hours to play, and it's calling it a light version of something else, wow.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it for that type of game, which is that strategic, long-term, 2-day game sometimes. I like it, so I give it a 9.
Well, since the two of you all can't agree, let me just step in here and make the final ruling. This is a good game, and this is a lot closer to a 9 than a 6. A disappointing 6 down there. No, but you do have to go into it eyes open. This is going to be a long game, and this is going to be a Euro-style game or kind of a complex game. But really, I say complex, but once you get going and the flow of the game is happening, I felt like it went along pretty well. There are definitely some times where people in front of you are taking a little longer. You've been working for a couple of rounds to try to get to a certain point, and now you're finally ready to make that step, and so you're waiting on these people in front of you to make up their minds. So you have that anticipation of being able to make your move. And then other times you're going to be the one that's holding up the table because now you're trying to figure out what's the best thing to do. And you have to keep in mind what's going to happen in the rounds coming up later and that sort of thing. So I really like an involved, long game, and particularly one where there are so many different paths to victory that, seemingly anybody, we played a 5-player version, and just about anybody was looking like they could win that game because there were so many different ways to go about it, and I like that. The only thing worse than a marathon game is halfway into it realizing you're buried and you're never going to catch up, and you've still got 2.5, 3 hours to go. In this game, everybody I think felt pretty good about the strategy that they were trying to work, and in the end, we had a winner, but it was close, and I really liked it. So I think the gameplay, there's a lot of moving parts and pieces, and there's tons of strategy. Things you do in the early rounds definitely come back in the later rounds. I really liked it, and I'm going to go all the way to a 9.5 on the gameplay.
Wow.
To me, that's where this game that was the strongest part of this game, was actually sitting and playing it. And they may think I'm crazy, but we wrapped it up and we finished in about 5 hours, and I actually felt like it kind of went quick. I felt like it was a quick 5 hours, if there is such a thing.
I agree with you. I think the gameplay is what makes this game popular. And I've heard it described as a heavily Euro game with Ameritrash combat.
Yeah.
That's what I think that fits it well. Because when we did start fighting, it was just like piles of ships on somebody. And speaking of gameplay, the rule where after you pass, you can only do like 3 things, and one of those is move, and one of those is build, and one is upgrade. That's genius, because then once you pass, you don't just die because someone has spotted a weakness in your armor. Then it allows you to like make a reactionary move to keep from just getting rolled.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. So then we're going to go finish up with replayability, and I assume that's going to be kind of low.
Oh my goodness. I liked it. I mean, it was not an unenjoyable experience for me or anything.
It was not an unenjoyable hangnail,
but
still a hangnail.
I just don't know. I mean, if someone were to say, hey, Jared, let's game for 5 hours tonight, I'd almost want to play some other games I enjoy more than this, maybe 2 or 3 times in the 5 hour span or whatever.
It's a niche game.
It is a niche game, and it's a genre game I usually like, but I like the examples of this genre to run quicker for me and everything. I'm going to have to say, because I can tell I'm not going to be joined by my 2 compatriots, replayability for this for me, I mean, you'd have to butter me up and talk me into it, because it's not going to be anything that I'm just going to say, let's play Eclipse again this weekend. It's not going to happen. I would play it again, not happily, though. I'm going to go. I'm going to go 6.5 on that. I mean, above average. I'll probably play it again sometime in my future. It's never going to be a game I'm going to suggest, though.
Gotcha. I would play it if I had the time. The problem is, amongst those type games like Axis and Allies and such, I prefer Axis and Allies, but that's because of the genre, the historical theme rather than the space theme. But if you were slapped like Star Wars on it, or Star Trek even, I would probably up the replayability for me, because then I feel like I'm connected to the pieces a little bit more. But it's not that game. So this is a game I'm probably going to break out once every 1.5 to 2 years, just because you're going to have a problem finding that many people willing to commit that much time to it. So that's going to drive down the replayability, but not for me, because I would want to replay this. It's just, as an adult, you have a job and you have other commitments. So I'm going to come in at about a 7.5 with it.
Yeah, I think the big drawback to this is that length, that commitment. And while I think this game plays probably just fine with 3 people, I do think that really you want the sweet spot of 4 people and maybe even 5. If you're going to go ahead and have a marathon, just dive in and make it a marathon session and go for 5 people or whatever. So, that's tough. But again, that's what this game is. So it's sort of hard to knock it down when it's delivering what it promises. So for me, the replayability, as long as you know what you're getting into, I think is high, because they're sort of, as we've discussed before, there's so many different avenues in this game. There's so many different ways to go. If you get boxed in, it's not that big of a deal. You can start throwing your resources in a different direction and hold your own. If you find that no one's really paying much attention, you can explore and really expand and get a bunch of points that way. So I think it's a good game, because you can try all kinds of different tactics and different strategies and different ways about it. So I'm going to go ahead and rate it pretty high, even though it gets a little asterisk on there that you have to know this is a long one. It's going to be hard to get people to get on board with you. So, but I'm going to give it an 8 for replayability on this one myself.
I probably should have went higher too for that reason, but I'm going to stick with my score. Because I don't think it's going to matter. I mean, it kind of surprises me now that we've heard everybody's scores on everything that this did not rank higher, because it feels like a higher rank game to me. But
it's because we involved, it's a big investment
Yeah,
of effort, getting everybody together. I mean, just trying to get 5 of us together in one room,
for 5
all
hours,
adults with jobs and stuff like that, would be like, hey, we're going to play a board game for 5 to 6 hours. Let's all just like, oh, okay. So it feels momentous whenever you can do that.
Yeah, right.
It's not like a game of, hey, let's come over and play a game of so-and-so, it'll take 35 minutes.
Right.
So we invested a lot of time in this, but
I'm kind of surprised too that because it's ranked so high, that no one's come out with any like expansions, or maybe they have and I don't know about them, but I don't think they have.
I don't think so.
I honestly,
more races or more ships.
I honestly don't see why this game is rated. I mean, y'all brought up quite a few pros, and I brought up quite a few cons or whatever. But to tell you the truth, I just don't see anything earth-shattering or totally revolutionary in this game.
Yeah,
there are some neat ideas I've never seen before, but I don't know that it would rank at 12. Right, I think maybe it's because the group of people who rate those games are more hardcore gamers than they are,
Maybe.
we sometimes walk the line between hardcore and
Very casual.
casual gamers, whereas we try to get both. I think a lot of those scores come down from people who are just
Maybe, because we've played quite a few niche games and, other games that would never see the top 100 or whatever. And they had some little quirk or whatever to it. That's what stands out to me. I'd be like, that's a really cool concept, It makes it worth playing the game
like
for
nothing
me.
personal is not in the top 100.
Yeah.
Which
that's a lot of fun.
I think
Yeah.
it should be.
Yeah.
Anyway, there you have the scores. We'll put the total, or the average rather, right here. And then let's put over here what Board Game Geek rates it. And over here, what's left? Whatever we have left, we'll put over there. Oh, and what we rate.
Yeah.
So, that's what it was. Anyway, thanks for watching this edition of the Top 100 Board Game Geek
See you
Games
later.
Eclipse, and we'll see you next week.